She stood quietly in the back of the grand hall, dressed in a simple black dress that didn't scream money or status, unlike everyone else at the charity auction that night. The event was packed with high-profile names, all eager to flaunt their wealth, outbid each other, and sip expensive champagne while cameras flashed. She didn't seem to belong there, at least not to the people who quickly sized her up with judgmental glances and harsh smiles. A few even whispered behind her back, wondering who had invited the outsider. They snickered when she hesitated near the auction table, clearly not mingling like the others. No one expected much. After all, she hadn't even raised a paddle during the high-stakes bidding rounds. But what they didn't know was that she hadn't come to buy. She had come to give, something so rare, so valuable, that it would silence the entire room. The woman everyone mocked was holding onto a secret no one could have guessed. A piece of history hidden in plain sight, quietly protected for years by someone who never once sought fame or attention. As the final item was announced and the energy in the room began to fade, she stepped forward. The laughter stopped. The whispers went quiet. What happened next would not only change the course of the evening, it would change the way they saw her forever. But before anyone could react, she placed a small, wrapped box on the stage, and the room held its breath. The box was small, too small to be anything important, at least in the eyes of the wealthy crowd who had just spent thousands on art pieces, diamond brooches, and luxury vacations. Some guests exchanged amused glances, assuming it was a last-minute donation from someone desperate to feel included. But the woman whose name barely anyone knew stood calmly under the bright stage lights, her hands steady, her eyes locked on the auctioneer. She didn't flinch under the weight of the curious, judgmental stares. Instead, she spoke just loud enough for the microphone to catch her words. "This piece belonged to my grandfather. He said one day it would find its way back to the world." A murmur swept through the crowd. A few leaned in, intrigued. Others rolled their eyes. The auctioneer, clearly puzzled but professional, carefully unwrapped the box. Inside was a glimmer of something metallic, aged yet gleaming under the lights. He paused, frowned, looked again. A man from the front row, a well-known historian, stood up with a sudden jolt and crossed the room without asking. The box was no longer a joke. In fact, within seconds, it had become the center of the entire evening. People began whispering again, but now it was different. There was tension, confusion, maybe even fear. Who was this woman really? And what exactly had she just given away without asking for a cent? One thing was clear: the night had just taken a turn no one saw coming. The historian's hands trembled slightly as he examined the artifact under the spotlight. This can't be real," he muttered, pulling a magnifier from his jacket pocket. The guests, suddenly on edge, leaned forward, straining to hear. The woman hadn't moved. She simply watched as a room full of power and prestige wrestled with the idea that they might have overlooked the most important person in the building. Rumors started to swirl. Some said it was a royal relic. Others whispered about a lost museum piece from Europe. A few claimed it was stolen, but there was no proof, only nervous speculation. In the back corner, a man in a sharp navy suit made a quiet phone call. His family had sponsored the event, and he didn't like surprises. Across the room, a luxury art dealer who had flown in from New York pushed through the crowd, trying to get a closer look. The artifact had changed everything. And yet, no one knew the woman's name, not really. Someone whispered she lived in a modest cottage by the beach, barely seen except during morning walks with her dog. It didn't add up. A board member from the charity approached her cautiously, offering a smile that was more curiosity than kindness. "Where did you get this?" she asked. The woman gave a small smile but said nothing. The silence only deepened the mystery. All around her, whispers turned into questions, questions turned into theories, and beneath it all, tension kept building. Security had quietly stepped closer to the stage, not because anyone thought she was dangerous, but because the artifact, now confirmed by the historian to be centuries old, was suddenly worth more than anything else in the building. The charity's chairwoman, now visibly flustered, tried to keep the event flowing, but the crowd had shifted entirely. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted her story. Still, she didn't speak. She held her silence as if it were more valuable than the gold in the object itself. A few guests, previously dismissive, now hovered nearby, hoping to strike up conversation or casually offer business cards. One man even offered her a ride home in his town car, which she politely declined with a half smile. Behind the scenes, the charity staff scrambled to verify the artifact's authenticity. An international art foundation had already sent a message requesting an official statement. The woman finally stepped down from the stage and walked calmly toward the refreshment table. People parted for her without saying a word. Even the pianist had stopped playing. In the quiet hum of confusion and awe, someone finally asked out loud, "Why now? Why would she donate something like that, here?" The question hung heavy, not just because it was a good one, but because no one had any idea what her motives were. Some thought it was revenge. Others whispered about an old family promise, but only she knew the real reason, and it was still locked behind her unreadable expression. As the woman stood quietly by the refreshment table, sipping from a glass of water and ignoring the growing crowd of curious onlookers, a man in a dark grey suit approached her. He didn't look like one of the socialites or wealthy donors. His presence was too still, too calculated. He leaned in slightly and whispered something that caused her expression, until now calm and unreadable, to flicker just for a second. That flicker didn't go unnoticed. A journalist nearby, who had been live tweeting the auction, narrowed her eyes and instinctively started recording. Something was off. Within moments, the quiet buzz of the room shifted again as someone from the auction team approached the microphone and announced they were temporarily halting proceedings. No reason was given, just a vague mention of a legal matter needing attention. The artifact, still resting on its velvet-covered pedestal, was suddenly covered and moved backstage by a pair of gloved assistants, escorted by security. Whispers exploded into full conversations. Who was this woman really? Why was someone claiming legal rights to the artifact now? And who was that man in the grey suit? The woman didn't speak. She simply placed her glass down and calmly walked out of the hall. But now, speculation was louder than ever. Some said she had ties to a lost royal bloodline. Others claimed the artifact was tied to a missing museum collection stolen decades ago. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. Her donation wasn't just generous, it was dangerous. 2 days after the interrupted auction, headlines exploded, not just in the Hamptons, but around the world. It turned out the mysterious woman, known to the public only as Ms. Delaney, wasn't just a generous donor. She was the granddaughter of a famed explorer who disappeared under suspicious circumstances nearly 60 years ago. The artifact she had donated, believed to be an old ceremonial piece, was actually confirmed by global experts to be Asteris, the Asteria pendant Asteris, a priceless relic thought to have been lost during a politically motivated museum theft in Europe. The man in the grey suit was an international investigator who had been tracking the pendant for over a decade. What no one knew was that Miss Delaney had spent years recovering her grandfather's scattered collection, piece by piece, under various identities. Her quiet, humble lifestyle in the Hamptons had allowed her to operate under the radar. The auction was meant to be her quiet way of giving the pendant back to the world, but the moment it went public, old interests resurfaced. The charity's board, once skeptical of her, now praised her as a protector of history. But just as reporters gathered for her official press appearance, she never showed. Instead, an envelope was hand-delivered. The world was watching now, but she was already gone. In the weeks that followed, Miss Delaney's story became the subject of documentaries, podcasts, and even museum exhibits. People who once ridiculed her at the charity auction were now speaking her name with awe, calling her a modern-day legend. Reporters scoured the globe trying to uncover her whereabouts, but she had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only curiosity and admiration. The pendant she donated now sat in a climate-controlled display at the British Museum, credited to Anonymous, in memory of exploration and legacy. A small plaque beneath it read, Asterisk, some treasures are meant to be shared, not stored. Asterisk. Back in the Hamptons, whispers of her presence remained. Locals swore they'd seen her walking along the beach at sunrise or slipping into a coffee shop before dawn. Her old cottage, once mocked for its simplicity, became a symbol of quiet strength. Tourists even began to visit it, taking photos and leaving messages on the gate, thanking her for reminding the world that humility luck, still unbothered by opinions, still searching for meaning in the past, still guided by something deeper than fortune or fame. Her story wasn't just about a priceless artifact. It was about staying true to purpose, even when the world doubts you. And in the end, that was the real treasure.